Hi, and welcome to today's Lightning Talks. I'm Nicky Ruda. I work in product marketing here at solo.io. I'm excited to welcome our first Lightning Talk speaker for the day. So please help me extend a warm welcome to Denis Jannot, who'll be showing us how to troubleshoot with Envoy. Over to you, Denny.
I'm Denis Jannot, director of the field engineering team at Solo in EMEA. In this talk, I'm going to speak about how you can use our Envoy UI tool online to analyze some Envoy config dumps. And you can have like obviously Envoy config dumps when you use Istio, but also when you use our API gateway glue edge. In that talk, I'm going to use an example on Istio, and for that I've deployed like an Istio cluster where I have the Bookinfo application deployed. You can see here in this Bookinfo namespace. I have the different components. If you're not familiar with the Bookinfo application, that's the application that is composed of multiple microservices. The front end is the product page, and this front end talk to different backend services, the review service and the detail service. And you can see in the review service you have multiple versions, V1, V2, and so on. Here I just deployed V1 and V2, so if I go to this application, you see V1 is no stars and V2 has black stars, right? So if I go there, you can see mostly half of the time I get no stars or black stars, right? And it's just because I have no specific rules right now. So let's say I want to apply something like that, right? Traffic shift so that 90% of my request goes through V1 and 10% to V2, right? So if I just try to apply this, then I will see that it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? I could look at the configuration by myself. We could find that out using the Envoy UI tool, but you don't need it, right? Basically, you can use just the Istio analyze to get some insight here. So I analyze my Bookinfo namespace, and I can see that it tells me that there is no destination rule for this subset here. So what I need is just to go and apply this, right? So I just applied this destination rule, and now everything should be good, right? I will have no stars most of the time, so 90% of the time, and sometimes I will get black stars. Okay, so in that example, I don't need to go into the config dump. But now let's take a look at an example where I would need to go through this config dump because the analyze could not help me. So let's say here, if I, let's say I change the port here. So it doesn't break the configuration because it tells me if a request come on port 80, not 9080, then I will do a split between these two subsets here, right? And if I apply it, obviously for Istio, everything is fine, right? Because there is nothing wrong in this policy, right? But if I go there, as a user, I can see that half of the time I get black stars and half of the time I don't get them. I get like V1, half of the time V2. And here it's a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot because I don't know exactly what could be the problem, and the analyze tells me that everything is fine, which is normal because in Istio itself it's fine, right? So you can use other thing. You can have like this proxy config command line that can give you insight about this product page, and it tells you like many things, right? The proxy all shows you like information about the routes, the clusters, and you can see here, for example, that you have like multiple clusters, with the subset, so everything seems fine. You can, have a look at the different routes, and that doesn't tell you much more, right? If you want to get much more, then you have to do something like exporting in JSON, right? And then you get the full config dump, from the Envoy proxy, which is very useful, right? But it's a lot of data, right? So if I store it in, let me store it here, and I look at the number of lines, you see that's more than 10,000 lines, right? So that's a lot to digest, right? So the other thing you can do is that you can use a tool that is basically a little bit the same as this Envoy UI, and that's the first thing I built. I built that first, and then I built this UI around it. So with this tool, which is you can download, it's open source, Envoy Cutter, basically you can pipe this config dump to take a look at it in a kind of table format, right? So obviously it's a lot of information depending on your screen. You just change it, and you see that you have multiple entries there, and you could look at, you see this, the listener, the root, the domain, and you see you have like for each target, right, you have different entries, right? So one of the things I can do here is just add this option, so I filter only on the domain that starts with review. So it's a lot better already, right? I can see that I have 2 entries, right? And I can see that I have this route here for the reviews on port 80, which is doing this traffic shift. So okay, that makes sense, everything seems fine. But I can see that I have this other route on 9080, and that doesn't have the traffic shift. So it gives me this information. Oh, I have these 2 routes. Do I expect that, right? No, I don't expect that. In fact, it's because I should not have this route 80. I wanted to apply this to the existing route, right? So that's a way to help you, right? So it's one thing you can do that way, right? But you can also, because I exported the config dump, you can also directly go there and find your config dump, and it will load it in the same format, and you can do even more filtering there, and you can see the same thing, right? You can see here that I have like these 2 entries, one for the port 80 where I have my traffic shift, and one for the port 9080 where I don't have the traffic shift, right? And that's one thing you can do, but you can also do much more, and search for just one of these name here, for example, and just put it here, and you can search inside this config dump and find out like what could be wrong, right? You can take a look at for here I have an entry, cluster entry for this name, and you can go down and look at all the reference for one specific name, and search through the full dump for the cluster entries, the listener, many different things, right? So that's also quite useful. So now that I know that what's wrong here is that I wanted to have this shift on this route and not on the port 80, I can let me put it bigger now. I can just go back here and say, oh yeah, that's here because I have this port 80. Now if I apply this instead and I run the same command than before, and again I just reduce it a little bit, then I can see I have only 1 entry for the port 9080, and I have this traffic shift, right? So it's an example, right? It's obviously not always easy to find good examples when you try to break things, intentionally, right? But that was a way for me to show you the fact that you can get this representation of your config dump and you can go through it and browse and filter and so on. I can help you to understand what's going on, why you have the specific behavior, right, for a specific route. And you can do much more than that, obviously. You could also see, like why you have a specific timeout, or you could see in the dump that you have a specific timeout and you didn't expect it, and then you can research about why you have this specific behavior. Another thing I wanted to highlight is that here, and let me just open the browser developer tool so that it really makes sense. So here, when I refresh, you see all the HTTP requests, right, that to load this page, right? But what's really important is that when I browse and upload a file like this config dump, you can see here that no communication have happened, right? Because everything is done in the browser. So we don't get access to your config dump. They are not sent to the internet, right? They just stay on your browser. So that's a very important thing, because in this config dump, you can have some sensitive information, right? You will not have like highly sensitive one, but you could have even like just having your domain name and path and configuration. It is sensitive information, right? So just be reassured that here everything is done in the browser and that you don't have any risk in using this tool. So I hope it was useful, and I hope you'll use it. You can give us feedback on Slack. You can also give feedback by creating issue in this repo if that makes sense. Thanks everyone. Have a good conference.
All right. Well, thank you, Denny. For those of you attending, if you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat here or post them in our Slack room. Be sure to check out the other tracks for our next lightning talks by clicking on reception at the top left of your window. And thanks for joining us today.